we're recording. Mayor, please.
Okay, well, welcome everyone. This is actually the first of 2022's quarterly police presentations. And I'm going to ask Councilwoman Elsie Foster Dublin, who is our council liaison to the police department, to say a few words about what we've been working on and turn it over to the police chief. Councilwoman.
Thank you, Mayor. We have been busy compiling information and to questions that you've had that some people have submitted. I'm quite sure there are other questions that people would like to ask, and we'll be answering those questions as well. I want to thank everyone for logging in and to come in and to ask questions that they're going to propose to us tonight, and that we will be able to answer. And we want to keep this community forum going as long as we have people that attend and is willing to participate. I want to thank each and every one of you for being here tonight in advance. And also just a quick reminder that the weather is changing and safety is always my #1 concern, that as the weather changes, you wear your helmets, you do what you need to do to keep yourself safe on the road. Slow down. In our town, we're getting ready to roll out a whole public safety campaign about being safe in town. And the chief is going to be addressing some of the issues that was brought up last year and earlier this year as it pertains to traffic and pedestrian safety. So I'm looking forward to a spirited conversation and more information coming from our police chief. Chief Abrams, I'm going to let you take it away from here.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. I'm Chief Abrams. Thank you for joining us on your Thursday evening. Real quick, just let you know what's going to happen. I have a short presentation on the state of the department. It's going to tie up last year and start the first quarter of this year, and a brief PowerPoint presentation on the new use of force that the state has rolled out for all police departments. And I'm going to answer about 10 questions that were pre-submitted, and then we'll be open for any questions anybody who's attending now might have that wasn't covered in the presentation. So if you'll bear with me 1 second. I'm going to share my screen. Where is it? Here. Okay, is that working as a PowerPoint, or is it in that regular thing? There we go. Okay, so this is going to
It's not open, Chief.
It's not opening. It's opening on my screen.
No, it's not open yet. You need to click on it.
It's open here on mine.
Nope, not on ours.
All right, hang on. I'll stop sharing. Try it again. This happened at the council meeting one night too. There was a lag.
It's technology. It never fails.
Yeah, I think we would have gotten it by now with all the COVID meetings we've had this way. All right, how about now?
Good.
We're
Okay.
there. Thank you.
All right. So this is going to cover our fourth quarter of last year, since the meeting in December was canceled, and then it'll go right into first quarter this year. So that's our total year's worth of calls for service for 2021, and it's broken down by quarter. This recording will be on the borough website, so anybody can come back and refer to this again. The numbers will all be there. Total year to success. Recording again. Okay, here we go. So total year to date last year was 19,294 calls that Highland Park police officers responded to within the borough. That covers everything from medical calls to car stops to any investigations we did, everything. So 19,294 calls responded to by our 28 police officers. Use of force last year, there was 2 instances total, and the stats and some more details are available on the borough website for those. You can see here our motor vehicle stops and arrests. Pretty even on the arrests throughout the year. Motor vehicle stops went down at the end of the year as winter came on and there were some COVID issues. Bias incidents went up. As we know, bias incidents are a pretty significant challenge we've been facing in the last couple of years. I don't know why that says 2,242 bias incidents. That's not accurate. We've had 9 bias incidents last year. So they have been on the rise lately across the spectrum of victims, from religious to race to sexual identity. Bias incidents are on the rise. The biggest thing with that, and I say this a lot, is please, if it happens, you have to let us know. We received too many reports of a bias incident way after it happened, days or even weeks, and there's nothing for us to investigate, nothing for us to follow up on, and we can never find out who committed these acts. So please, if you're a victim of a bias incident or a witness to a bias incident, please let us know so we can investigate. Burglaries last year were high. We had a lot of burglaries. The last quarter, we had a rash, and I'll talk about it later. We had a rash of burglaries to garages and cars. It was higher than usual, and I don't know why, but that seems to be across the state for that. So I'm going to go into our 2022 first quarter update. I'm going to give you 3 quick things that we're doing. I've talked about ICAT and ABLE before in a previous presentation. These are the 2 training modules that all police officers have to go through and complete to be compliant with the Attorney General's new use of force policy. I'm happy to say that we made the deadline. Middlesex County is one of the only counties in the state to have accomplished it on time. We were lucky enough to be able to provide a trainer for ABLE that went out. One of our officers actually went to be one of the trainers. He did so well in the initial training. He had special training after that. And we have one of our officers who's actually one of the county trainers who trained everybody else, which is a great honor for him and for us. Second, coming up on March 1st, the New Jersey Safe Passing Law went into effect. This is a new law that tells drivers that they have to slow down when they're passing anybody who's in the roadway who's not in a car. So a scooter, a bicycle, a pedestrian, and give them 4 feet of space. If they can't give them 4 feet, you have to slow down to 25 miles an hour and be prepared to stop until they can safely get around whatever is in the roadway that's not a motor vehicle. It's a good law. Hopefully it will eliminate some of the issues we've been having across the state with pedestrian and bicyclist accidents. But it is a new law. Not a whole lot of people know about it yet. You will see officers out there enforcing it. So please slow down, move over, give people 4 feet of space if they're walking or they're on bikes or on scooters. And we were awarded a grant from New Jersey Division of Highway and Traffic Safety for 100 hours of distracted driving enforcement and education. So this is a grant that's going to try to help forestall the 800,000 crashes we've had over a previous 4-year period that were all attributed directly to distracted driving, predominantly cell phone use while people are driving. So this grant will help pay for officers to be out there and to enforce motor vehicle violations for distracted driving and provide education to drivers where necessary. We're going to start the initiative for this spring, and you'll see it roll out with a statewide campaign on a crackdown for distracted driving. And let's get into stats for the department for the first quarter. So far in the first quarter of this year, we've handled 6,678 calls for service. We've had 1 use of force event this year so far. 827 motor vehicle stops. We've had 30 arrests. We've had 2 bias incidents already this year. Luckily, I know of 1 other that was reported, but we could probably attribute it to a bias incident, but it wasn't reported directly to us in time, and the victim wants no part of sharing what happened to him with us. So again, if you are a victim of bias crime, please let us know. And burglaries, it's down significantly from last year, and I'll touch on that when I go into the prepared questions later. Somebody asked about that, and I have a couple answers. So that's it for the department. I have a quick PowerPoint of a dozen slides for the use of force. I know we have a lot of questions, so I'm going to try to get through this pretty quickly. And again, I'm always available by email if you have other questions about anything I'm going over now. And again, this will be posted. Are you guys seeing the PowerPoint correctly?
No.
No, not? All right.
No, not yet. I guess you got to click in and click out again.
How about now?
Yes.
Yep. Okay.
Yes.
All right, cool. So New Jersey use of force update. So there we go. So in December of 2020, our Attorney General at that time released a new use of force policy that was going to take effect January 1st of this year, 2022. That gave us from December 2020 to December 31, 2021 time to get everything in order. Part of that was that ABLE and ICAT training that I discussed before. And part of that was revamping our entire use of force policy. I am happy to say that although it's a new state policy, many of the principles that this new policy emboldens or encompasses, we already had in place in Highland Park. We saw the need for these kind of things coming a mile down the road and implemented them for our officers. I'm glad that the state has come on board and has this kind of training now that's a little more universal and more steady across the board for all officers, but we had most of the things in the new policy already in place in Highland Park for some time. So all officers have to complete training that covers the 7 core principles of the new policy, and I'm going to run through those in a minute. One major difference is in the past, pursuit policy for vehicles, like if you were chasing a motor vehicle that had a stolen motor vehicle, or somebody who committed a crime and fled in a motor vehicle, was a separate policy, and a policy that covered less lethal, both CED or a taser, colloquially known as a taser, or even impact munitions, like you would see like a less lethal shotgun round was covered under the less lethal policy, which was separate. The new policy combines all those under one and gives methods for reporting the use of these things in real time through a web portal that people can actually view and pull up whenever they want to. It also added a new level of force that we didn't have in New Jersey before, called show of force. In the past, if a police officer had to remove their service weapon from the holster, it was not reported. It was considered constructive authority, and it was no different than an officer giving verbal commands. Well, now, if that happens, if a police officer removes their duty weapon from their holster and points it at someone, they have to record it as a show of force, and that now gets tracked. And then twice a year, a review of the policy and training has to be conducted for every officer. Core principle 1 is the sanctity of human life and serving the community. That's the primary overriding goal of any use of force. You respect and uphold the dignity of all persons at all times in a non-discriminatory manner. And that's the primary goal of the use of force policy. Principle 2 is force is only a last resort, and we have a duty to de-escalate. We've been working on de-escalation in Highland Park for some time. We've had some really great successes with it. And it's good to see it spread throughout the state this way. We've been conducting training on de-escalation, critical incident training, things of that nature for a few years now. But now there's an actual requirement from the state to do these things, not just because we wanted to, but now the state says everybody has to do it. So this is a little bit different. So objectively reasonable, necessary, proportional force. That means you can't use force that would be over the top for a minor infraction. The force use have to be objectively necessary and reasonable under the circumstances. And that those circumstances come on the kind of force you're trying to overcome, reason why force is being used, whether it's to protect property or life and those things. And there's a series of decisions that officers have to make for the deployed force to make sure that what they're doing is appropriate and necessary and objectively reasonable. Duty to use deadly force only as an absolute last resort. This was generally the way in New Jersey that deadly force was always looked at anyway, but it was never codified or put into language that we can reflect on. This new policy does that for us. Obviously the use of deadly force is serious, and it can only be used to protect life. You cannot use it to protect property. It can only be used to protect life, whether that's the life of another resident, another citizen, or the police officer themselves. But there's a bigger emphasis now on making sure that that is the last resort before it is used. duty to intervene and report. We've had this for some time, but this is new for the state. Basically, this is if an officer is using force that's inappropriate or seems like they're going down a path that would lead them to doing something inappropriate, officers have a duty to intervene to make sure that doesn't happen, to stop a fellow officer, and then to report it up the chain of command for investigation and intervention. And it'll be recorded and it will follow that officer throughout their career if it's turned out to be sustained. So this is something that we've done, and we've had a duty to intervene in our use of force policy for a while, but this is now new across the state. Core Principle 6 is the duty to render medical assistance if you use force and you're forced into that situation. And when force is no longer necessary and the scene is safe and secure, you now have to render aid to any injured persons, including the person who you might have just used force on. Again, this is something that we had in our use of force policy in the past, but now it's codified throughout the state. If you have to use pepper spray, then you have to help decon that person. If you have to use a firearm and you cause a wound, then you have to treat that wound and do the best you can to make that person comfortable and keep them from dying, if that's the case. So Core Principle 6 is you have to render medical assistance following any use of force. Core Principle 7 is another thing that we've done for a while, as duty to report and review uses of force. We've had an administrative review of all force use in our department since the captain and I took over in 2019. That was one of the first things we instituted. It is reviewed at 2 levels, at the supervisor and the administrative level. We review body cams, reports, everything. It automatically triggers this. It finally gets to my desk, and then I have to review on what's appropriate or not appropriate. If not appropriate, then that starts an investigation and reporting to the state. And it goes from there. So less lethal in Highland Park, we do have tasers, CEDs, which people I'm sure are familiar with from seeing videos and on the news and whatnot. We do not have any launched impact munitions in Highland Park. No less lethal shotgun rounds, no impact rounds, baton rounds, things like that. We don't employ anything like that. We do have tasers under the less lethal umbrella. Pursuit, you might have seen in the paper that the pursuit policy, when it was redone and added to this, was also made a lot more strict. There's very, very few things that you can pursue for within New Jersey now. So as it falls under use of force, it has to be reported through the use of force portal, and it can easily be tracked. You can pursue for serious crimes against people, murder, aggravated assault, things like that, but no longer for any property crimes. Show of force, I talked about this earlier. If an officer does draw their weapon or spark a taser. So sparking a taser isn't necessarily launching the darts, but just creating that spark on the front of the device as a warning. If that happens, then an officer does have to complete a show of force report. Levels of force. So it's not some places have a ladder where you have to go from one to the next. In New Jersey, that's not the case. You can pick whatever one is most appropriate at that moment. These are the levels of force that are in New Jersey now. Enhanced physical force is new as of 2010 when we authorized the use of tasers, and the constructive authority was modified to break out show of force. So it adds 2 new levels of force to the use of force umbrella that we have. Covered that. Additional mandatory training, like I said, ABLE and ICAT, all officers have been through it. We did lead Middlesex County getting our officers through these trainings. We were one of the first 3 departments in the whole county to have our entire agency complete these trainings. It's my contact information, my email, my phone number. I'm available if anybody has more questions or comments about this presentation. That link on the bottom will bring you to the AG's webpage on this policy and the actual use of force. It's a 80-page document, I believe, that covers everything in detail that I just went over quickly. And that is that. Are we back to normal?
Back to
Yes.
normal.
Okay, so we did receive some questions ahead of time, and I'd like to go through those now. I'm going to start with the questions that we had for December's meeting that was canceled. There's only a couple. We have a lot of people asking the same questions. So I kind of combined them. So we received a number of questions at the end of last year regarding the intersection of North 4th and Raritan and any changing of the traffic patterns there to address safety concerns. We did have a number of pedestrian accidents at that location. These questions also tied into queries about the closing of South 3rd and partial closing of North 4th at the intersection of Raritan for the town tables, which is no longer there. So just to keep everybody in the loop, we work with New Jersey State DOT for North 4th and Raritan intersection on all the issues related to the crashes that occurred there. The DOT stated they recommended an approve of a prohibition of left turns from North 4th Avenue. So if you're coming from North 4th Avenue, you will not be allowed to make the left-hand turn on Route 27 towards Edison. If you're coming from South 3rd, you can make the right-hand turn towards Edison or the left-hand turn towards New Brunswick. But coming from North 4th, you cannot make the left turn heading into Edison.
Chief, I just want to, if I could interrupt for 1 second, I just want to let you know, I'm pretty sure you're aware, the town tables on South 3rd are going back up in this spring. I think they're scheduled to go back up in April.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. But that's one intersection away from this one. So
Right.
last update from DOT was they submitted on January 20th a work order to have the signs put up. And they expect them to go up sometime in the next few weeks. It's the DOT. They're not always the best at getting back to us with things like that. So take it with a grain of salt, but we hope in the next couple of weeks, we'll see the signs prohibiting the left-hand turn from North 4th Avenue on 27. I had a question as to the legality of closing 3rd and 4th during the height of the COVID-19 health emergency and the creation of the town tables. That's a question that really needs to be addressed by the borough attorney and the borough itself. There was, the police don't make those decisions. The borough makes those decisions. They run them through the borough attorney. They get approved with the DOT, and then it goes up. And then it's just our job to enforce if there's any infractions or any problems that occur there. And that's what we do. So anyone with actual questions on the legality or the appropriateness of it, that's a governmental policy question that is handled by our borough attorney, our borough council, and the NJDOT. So you can please refer to them. We had a question about the break-ins. As I said when I was going over the statistics, the end of last year was heavy on break-ins, and beginning of this year has been light on break-ins. So I hear this a lot, so I want to clear up a little bit of confusion. People use burglary, theft, and robbery interchangeably, and they actually mean different things. And I just want to go over that real quick. So a burglary is when someone enters your home or vehicle to commit any kind of crime. A theft is when someone takes something that does not belong to them. And a robbery was someone uses force or threatens to use force when they make a theft, right? So we have had no robberies in Highland Park in regard to a series of break-ins or anything. There was no robberies. There were break-ins, there were burglaries, and there were thefts, but no robberies. Nobody was hurt, nobody was threatened, there was no force used. That being said, we did arrest 2 separate individuals in the late winter. And since those 2 individuals were arrested, we've seen a decrease in burglaries. As you saw, there was up the last quarter, there was over 24 break-ins and burglaries to vehicles and houses, and there was only 5 so far in the first 3 months of this year. So I'm hoping that we were able to, I hope that trend continues. But like every other town in the state, we have seen an increase in car thefts and car burglars over the last 4 months. So please make sure your doors and windows are locked in your car. Don't leave your key fob in your car. Don't leave your key fob near your front door, near your garage, because if it's close enough, you can still unlock the doors and get in and start the car. If you do notice your car is missing, please don't wait to report it until you get home from work that night. Call us that morning. Let us come out and do the investigation and get a head start on what's going on. This is plaguing the entire state right now. There are crews going out, 3 or 4 cars, each packed with people. They'll pull up, they'll try door handles. If they can get in, they'll try to start the car and take off. In driveways, in open door garages, on the street, everywhere. It's really bad. So protect yourself, protect your property, keep everything locked, and call us if you think something happened. So that was the extent of the questions for the last open forum. And now I'm going to go into, we had about six 6 or 7 questions for this open forum. So the first questions are questions about marijuana use and things of that nature. So what type of test would be administered if it is suspected that someone is driving high through Highland Park? The standard field sobriety test detects alcohol when someone is drunk driving, but is there a marijuana breathalyzer test that detects THC levels? This is a concern, seeing their plans to open several pot shops in our walking town and worry these people will be getting behind the wheel of their car. How can we hold these drivers accountable? And another question on the same line, how many GREs does HP have at its disposal? And where would they be traveling from to come to HP if Highland Park police officers notify them for roadside assistance? Since no actual chemical analysis for roadside testing for marijuana impairment exists, the state requires DREs to be the ones to make the roadside determination. So yes, the standard field sobriety tests that all officers are trained in are designed to detect impairment in general. They don't just detect alcohol impairment, they detect any impairment. Pain medication, marijuana, illicit narcotics, alcohol. And so the SFSTs will just tell if someone's impaired. Those are the roadside tests that you see when they have the balance test or the walk and turn test, things of that nature. So that doesn't just cover alcohol, that covers all impairment. If the officer believes that the person is impaired, it doesn't matter if it's alcohol or marijuana or medication, they'll be arrested and brought to headquarters and put on our Alcotest machine, which is a machine that is calibrated only for the presence of alcohol on their breath, and you can give a blood alcohol number, a percentage when that test is done. So they would be brought back and put on that. If that test is inconclusive, then the use of a certified drug recognition expert or DRE is indicated. And then they would come in and run further series of tests to determine if that person was driving high. So we have one Highland Park officer that is certified as a DRE, that's Sergeant David Soden, who also is one of our pedestrian and traffic safety people. However, Middlesex County has an excellent program that we spearheaded 5 or 6 years ago, where DREs from other jurisdictions are on call. Their overtime rate is subsidized by the county, and these DREs that are on call can be dispatched to neighboring jurisdictions if the need ever arises. DRE training is difficult, it is long, it is intensive. The prerequisites are numerous and very specific, and there are significant recertification requirements, and it's not something that every officer can be certified to do. It is time intensive, and it pulls an officer out of here for almost, I think, 4 or 5 weeks over the course of a year. So knowing this, the New Jersey State Police have instituted 2 additional programs that we can add on to SFSTs. That is ARIDE, which stands for Advanced Roadside Impaired Driver Enforcement, and DID, D-I-D, Drug Impaired Driving. All officers can attend this. They're 1 to 2 day programs. What these courses do is they help identify officers to identify drivers that are impaired by things other than alcohol, and helps to make the determination if they need a DRE or if the level of impairment is enough that they can charge on their own at the moment and follow up later with a DRE type thing. Another question we received was, it has been brought to my attention that a few high school students who would obviously like to remain anonymous, that there is a major vaping, quote, marijuana problem in the school bathrooms at the high school level. Are these bathrooms monitored? Also, I've been informed by middle schoolers that there is a marijuana supplier who currently sells pot to several 8th graders at the middle school. I don't know who the dealer is, but this is disturbing news. Yes, that is disturbing news. So I don't know if the school bathrooms are monitored. That's something that you're going to have to call and reach out to the school for. I know we work with the school. We go there when they need us. They'll call us if there is a problem. I don't know what the status is to how often they check the bathrooms, if it's continuous, if it's momentary. We haven't gotten any reports from the school or students or parents about a vaping problem at the school. This is the first I'm hearing of it, especially anything illicit. And we always work with the schools to determine if there's a problem. If they reach out to us and need our help, then they have our full resources available to determine what's going on. We will reach out to the school leadership and find out how we can assist them in this and bring it to their attention as well. Next question is, with anticipated increase in recreational pot shops and pot delivery services in Highland Park, how will Highland Park Police be protecting our under 21-year-old young adults and adolescents? How will they be monitoring and preventing underage distribution and use in Highland Park? We know from data in other states that teen use, underage use will increase substantially once the new businesses start running. So this is new territory for all of us. We currently have no method to monitor the inside of the dispensaries. Currently, the way the laws are written, that responsibility falls on the dispensary themselves to make sure they're checking for identification and they're careful that they're not dispensing to people who they shouldn't be presenting. That being said, in New Jersey, the laws do prohibit people from under 21 from obtaining cannabis. However, if they are caught with it, it is not a criminal act, and it is handled with a verbal or written warning, and if necessary, notification to parents and counseling for the first offenses. It's been decriminalized. While it's still illegal, it's not a criminal act. Violations for unlawful sales and distributions are based on the amount of cannabis possessed or sold, with extra penalties for violations, for example, in a school zone, on certain public properties, or violations involving giving it to minors or unapproved people. Anyone that sells or provides that to a minor faces double the normal jail time and fines for the regular charge. Any investigation into allegations of wrongdoing by the proprietor or employee of one of the establishments will be handled case-by-case basis. It'll be similar to getting complaints that a liquor store or a bar in town is selling to underage people, or cigarettes to underage people. We do have resources in town that we can use from the state, that we can call into town, licensing, regulatory things like that we can call in for help to determine what's going on there, to help our detectives and our officers investigate situations like that. Next question was, based on information shared from a former Newark narcotics officer, what is the town and police plan for when black market drug dealers come out of a park and undercut legal stores in town with cheaper and more addictive pot has been done elsewhere? I can assure you that the Highland Park Police Department will enforce all the laws in New Jersey regarding cannabis use, as well as sales, whenever necessary and appropriate. If an increase in illegal cannabis sales does occur, we will investigate. And again, we have those outside agencies for inspection and licensing that come in and help us if we believe it is a dispensary, and we have all the criminal investigatory tools in hand if we believe it's somebody with a black market type or underground drug trade type thing. While the laws are a little bit different to possession and for dealing those kind of drugs, they are laws still in effect there that we can use to enforce to make sure that people are doing what they're supposed to do. Next question is, a number of people are very sensitive to the smell of marijuana, and it affected their health and quality of life. How will the presence of marijuana smell be regulated in public areas? And will the pot-free zones at Highland Park be, and where? How will they be regulated and enforced? Another person had a similar question. If the town brings back South Third shared open space, will tobacco and marijuana smoking be allowed there? So the way the current cannabis laws work, any location where the smoking of tobacco products is prohibited, the smoking of any cannabis products is also prohibited. Those go hand in hand. The laws state that the police cannot use just the odor of cannabis to begin an investigation into a violation of any of these things. We have to actually witness it, see it, not just smell it. It makes things a little more difficult, but not impossible. If we have complaints or reports, officers will go out and observe, and if they see it, then they can take action as appropriate. As to the location of any smoke-free zones in Highland Park, the creation of anything new, that's up to, again, borough government, town government. We'll enforce whatever they decide to enact. But I can tell you that there is a prohibition of smoking on all borough properties. I believe, I'm not 100%, but I believe that the town table areas was prohibited from all smoking within the confines of that actual ordered out area. So if the mayor said those are coming back, I'm sure that prohibition will continue. Next question, why is Highland Park planning to license 6 pot shops in New Brunswick and Edison, which are much larger, or only licensing 3 each? Does the police department believe these shops will result in the demand for more police? And does the council intend to pay for additional, how does the council intend to pay for additional police or overtime? Again, this is new ground. We don't know how many licenses are actually to be granted. The town itself doesn't grant the final license, that comes from the state. The town will receive an application, they'll approve it to move to the state or not, then the state will have to determine if the license is granted or not. I did speak to a chief in another town who's had a medical dispensary in their town for quite some time. They have had zero increases in calls for service or a crime around that area that they can attribute to the dispensary. I don't expect things to be any different here in Highland Park. And any questions of the reasons behind the number of the licenses, how many the town decided to do. Again, that is not something the police department can speak to. We don't make the policies. We don't write the legislation. That is not something you want police officers doing. That is for your elected officials to do. And when the ordinances come out, then we take those ordinances, we look at them, we see what we need to do, and we get to work. Same thing goes for any increase in the PD. You know, if we determine that that's something that's necessary, that's something that the borough will have to figure out. I'm sure they'll ask me for input. I'll give them what I think we need, what we want, and how to do it. And then it's up to the borough to pass the appropriate resolutions to get that done. Now we're going to move on to some traffic questions. How can we encourage drivers in town to drive more safely and come to a complete stop at stop lines before advancing slowly to see around corners, trees, and cars blocking their view? Several times a day while on foot and in the car with my children, I see drivers go through these lines, often not even turning to look in my direction. So last year, I created a pedestrian and traffic safety bureau. This bureau is headed by a Lieutenant John Satchow, and Sergeant David Stode is assigned to him, along with several police officers assigned to that unit as ancillary duties. So while they're working patrol, they might have details to conduct for the traffic division. Our current course of action is to have officers conduct extensive patrols in areas throughout the borough whenever a resident tells us that there's an unsafe condition that they're witnessing. Our officers go out there with an eye on education and enforcement. We try to witness the same unsafe acts, stop those cars, talk to the driver, let them know why we're there. The residents in town feel unsafe. They're complaining about these unsafe acts, and this is why we're here. If necessary, you know, if you can stop for it before, if it's necessary, the officer will issue a summons in addition to the education. So we're also in the midst of working with HP Borough SWAC, which is a Safe Walking and Cycling Commission, and the New Jersey DOT to bring forth a campaign called Street Smart. This campaign is pretty great. It targets both drivers and pedestrians and charges both groups on their own to be more attentive and to be safer as they're moving about town. It's had great success in towns like Wayne and Princeton recently. And our Traffic, Pedestrian, and Safety Bureau, along with SWAC, have been working hand in hand to try to get this to roll out for this spring. We're on track, I believe, and I hope to get that rolled out pretty soon to everybody. The next question is about restorative justice. So it's a series of questions. I'm gonna try to combine some of it. So the resident wants to know what Highland Park can do for restorative justice matters for things that are civil in nature and not criminal. When we can hire social workers to work on civilian matters, to establish a restorative civilian justice team or committee to include resident social workers and borough representatives to consolidate in helping citizens and civilians resolve disputes, miscommunications, and negotiations. They want to know what I see as a necessity. If it is necessary, I'm sorry, to create a restorative justice group, and how to help keep our community level respected. And they'd like to see something like this established by May of 2022. And what my versions of civil matters being handled by police department looks like. So the borough has had a social worker. She's based out of the community center for quite some time. She's available to speak with residents confidentially whenever they have questions or concerns. She's more than happy to help them address them. You can find her contact information on the borough website under the social worker link in the departments tab on the borough website. So you can reach out there, or you can walk into the community center and ask to speak to the social worker, and she'll be able to help you. So the ability to offer restorative justice programs as a resolution to a criminal matter is not something New Jersey has available for adults at the police level. We do have that for juveniles, where we can use restorative justice if we're investigating a criminal matter for a juvenile, so somebody under 18. But for adults, it is only at the level of the courts or higher. That being said, in a proactive manner, we do have officers assigned to borough commissions that act on restorative practices such as the Municipal Alliance, the Mayor's Equity Advisory Council, Universal Access Committee, and the Highland Park Mental Health Commission, and just to name a few. So there is police input on these commissions, which are made up of social workers, residents, borough leaders, and police officers. So what I see as necessary versus what we can actually do, I think it's more important to go over what we can and can't do as police officers. So civil matters are important to everyone involved. Civil matters that, matters that don't rise to the level of a criminal act are important. So once we determine that, unfortunately, police officers can't get involved in civil matters. We don't have the authority or the ability to address these things. So once we have finished our initial investigation and we determine that a crime was not committed, we would be overstepping our legal authority and if we took any kind of action, it'd be inappropriate. What we do is we offer alternate avenues for help. We can identify different groups, different doctors, different facilities, different programs within the local government, state government that can assist. And that's about the extent of what we can do. In certain circumstances, we can act as an officer of the peace. We can stand by as a witness for a custody exchange between parents to make sure it goes smoothly. We can act as an escort for somebody trying to retrieve property from a place that they've been removed from. But if it's not a criminal act, police officers have no authority to actually act. We can't interject in a civil matter. Any increase in law enforcement's current ability to offer restorative justice to anyone is something that needs to be brought up to the legislators, elected officials, and courts. Now, the courts have a say in some restorative matters. So once a criminal matter is resolved on the level of police and charges are put out there and the person comes to court, the judge can start to use restorative measures, but that's not something a police officer can do on the road. And that is the end of our pre-submitted questions. So, Harry, if you'd be so kind.
Happy to take it.
Okay.
For all attendees, if you have a question you'd like to ask now, if you could please raise your hand, and I will enable you to be able to speak. I'll give another minute for anyone to raise their hand. As of now, there are no raised hands.
Okay, we'll give it another minute in case somebody is hesitating.
Mayor, Chief, I have no raised hands.
All righty. Chief, was there any other additional things that you had? Because you did the PowerPoint presentation as you promised. You did the stats from last year to this year. You provided the information on traffic safety and pedestrian safety. And you talked about what we're working on North 4th, and you talked about what we're also working on with the new pedestrian safety campaign. So, which is, I'm looking forward to coming for this summer, I should say this spring, which is awesome. And you gave an overview of where we are, and I think that's it. If we don't have any additional questions, I would like to thank you all for joining in and doing this presentation tonight. And we'll see you at the next quarterly meeting.
Okay.
I think a hand just went
With
up.
that said,
We do have one hand. It is Joseph Kalman. And Joseph, I'm enabling you to be able to ask a question now.
Yes, thank you again. Good evening. My question is, with the recent rise of weather, extreme weather, natural events, I wanted to know, are there any things you guys are taking into consideration when it comes to maybe flooding, practices, things like that. I live in a flooded area or flooded zone, and there's still a lot of debris, and there's a lot of stuff left over from Irma for particular reasons. I was just wondering if there's other strategies you're going to implement, if there's other things you're going to think about, things like that, if you can touch on that matter.
So Joseph, I'm happy to answer that question for you. The borough administrator and I and several of our emergency IDA team people have been talking about climate change and some of the things that we have been seeing. I've also been in touch with the county and the Department of Environmental Protection. So we are looking at flooding issues in particular. We know that there are several parts of town that are significantly impacted by these types of storms that we've been seeing more of. And we are looking at what we can do moving forward. The state as a whole is doing the same thing through the Department of Environmental Protection. And by the way, we are blessed to have the commissioner of the Department of Environmental Protection as one of our residents. So he's also keenly aware of our situation as well. And I saw Councilwoman Foster had her hand up.
I just wanted to add that as chair of public safety, all of public safety have been actively engaged in looking at this problem on a very localized level, because we know the areas in town that are impacted. And in the event of storms, Department of Public Works, they also go to clear the drainage so proper drainage can happen. But we're also looking at areas to see where the most impact is and what we can do to identify those areas and pass that information along. Not only passing that information along, we are moving into a period where we're doing what is called tabletop exercises. And in those exercises, where the entire fire, first aid, CERT, emergency management, the police department, the fire department, they're all coming together to look at areas if there was, or when there is another storm and people need any kind of emergency help, how do we come together collectively to communicate and to make sure that the residents are provided the resources and the help that they need. So we, on a very local level, we're working together to make sure we identify areas in the event that help is needed, that we can provide that. We're also looking at different equipment that we may need in public safety for evacuation and as such.
Okay, thank you. I do not see any other hands raised.
All right, then Elsie, this is your commission. So do you want to adjourn the meeting?
Yes, Mayor, I move for that. I want to thank everyone again for participating and looking forward to our next quarterly meeting. And thank you all and good night.
Good night and thank you.
Be safe.
Good night.
Bye. Bye-bye.